Welcome to another installation of Cards for Fun and Profit. And we're speaking today about the card company Donruss and Leaf. They were third on the scene and known for art. And they began really selling baseball cards in 1981 and continue to be present in the market up to today, 2022. So the history of Donruss starts off with 1954, founded as a confectionery company selling bubblegum, Super Bubble, by this gentleman whose name is Thomas Weiner. His two sons took over that self-titled family confectionery business, and therefore we can see where the name comes from because the sons were named Donald and Russell, put them together, and you have Donruss. Originally, the company was located in Memphis, Tennessee. The company production and distribution facility still exists today after being sold several years ago to Hershey's. In the 1960s and 1970s, they entered the card market with entertainment-themed cards, such as on the Bionic Woman and the Monkees and the Addams Family. And then they switched or continued, but included racing cards in 1965. And then, as I mentioned, the first baseball card set came out in 1991, and they also had football and basketball, boxing, golf, ice hockey, racing, and tennis. In 1975, there was a controversy between Topps and the Fleer Company over the fact that Topps was an illegal monopoly in terms of the contracts they had with players, and no one else could compete because they had a corner on the market for all of the star players. So this was ceased, and in 1982, the Donruss came out with their 605 card set, now 30 variations, because there were printing errors. The only key rookie of that particular series was the Tim Raines rookie, but Donruss was kind of unique in the fact that they had this iconic Diamond Kings by the artist Dick Perez, and these became a constant of the Donruss sets for years to come. In 1982, they also began to put, instead of bubblegum into the packs, they put a puzzle, and the first puzzle was a Babe Ruth puzzle. So this was sort of the insert, and you collected pieces, and the more packs you got, the more likely you would get all the pieces to form the puzzle. In 1983, General Mills sold Donruss to Beatrice Foods, and in 1984, they debuted the first rated rookies. Now, this is kind of a theme of baseball card purchasers and people who projected that they would be worth more money by basically buying rookie cards. So that became something that was really emphasized by the card dealers at this time. Then Fleer came out with a premium brand that was very successful and one of the top cards of the 1990s, especially if you got rookies in that particular set. And the set sold for quite a bit, but the cards became immediately very valuable. And one of the key rookies that year was Frank Thomas, but also Sammy Sosa's key card came out of the Leaf premium set. Now in 1994, revenue for Donruss, as well as other card companies, drastically dropped due to the baseball strike, meaning there was a cessation of baseball and there was less interest in collecting baseball cards that particular season. Donruss, as a result of this, sold to Score, which basically was owned by Pinnacle. In 1995, Donruss started what was called the Donruss Signature Series, which was kind of an elite series where you got signatures on the cards. Come around 1998, they filed for bankruptcy. And the reason was new packaging technology, league licensing fees, and player autograph contracts left them cash poor and really no choice but to basically declare bankruptcy. In 1998, the Playoff Corporation acquired Donruss, also Pinnacle, Score, and Leaf. 1992, Donruss and Leaf came out with a card that was kind of a fun card we'll talk about later called Triple Play. And in 2009, the Italian sticker company Panini acquired Playoff and began to have almost a monopoly on the market, kind of competing with Topps having a lot of cards and brands and so forth. In 2014, we had the return of the Donruss under the Panini, but still keeping the Donruss name. In 1988 through 1997, the companies produced Action Pack, which is kind of an embossed set, kind of a unique, it was kind of a thick card that became popular at the time and featured players like, even when Michael Jordan came up to the major leagues, he was on a particular card in that Action Pack set. So the packaging of that span of time from the 1980s into present time kind of shifted from the Donruss and then to their premium Leaf set, and then eventually back to Donruss, where it was Panini and them combined. But all along, kind of Donruss and Leaf were kind of underlying these particular cards. So when we look at what was the most successful set, probably in the Donruss years, was the 1984 660 card set. And for various reasons, it was a very kind of distinct card in terms of, on many of the cards, you actually saw the players' faces. They were kind of colorful. People enjoyed them. And it contained, that year contained a lot of rookies. And so we had the Don Mattingly rookie. And then remember, they're starting in 83, but continuing on with the rated rookie. So we have Joe Carter. Then we have Greg Gagne, Tony Fernandez, Darryl Strawberry, Dwight Gooden. So lots of rookies, lots of picturesque cards. So in that era of the 80s and certainly in the 90s, one of the most cherished sets to acquire and purchase, and at a premium price at that time, was the 1984 Donruss set. Since then, it still ranks high among the sets, but all the sets from 80 on are fairly easy to acquire and somewhat low price because of the card glut that occurred in that period of time. The 10 most valuable rookie cards that were in the 80s from Donruss were almost the same cards as when you heard my presentation for Fleer, that you have the Cal Ripken, 82, you have the Boggs, the Sandberg and Gwynn in 83, you have the Mattingly, 84, the Clemens and the Puckett in 85, Canseco, which was the highest priced card at the time for a new player. I think it was selling for anywhere from $75 to $100. Was the 86 rated rookie. Then you have Barry Bonds, but of course now there's lots of competition and other cards were more valuable, but still it was a rookie card. And then you have the Greg Maggs card of 1987. There's others, but these were the most valuable perhaps today. So we're just going to go through very briefly. We'll give you a few seconds to kind of view the different features of the cards, the colors, and the year. And as you'll see, you're kind of, the best cards are listed, but we're really looking sometimes for the rookies in these series. So in 1981, we have the sets. And as I said, it was the Tim Raines rookie that was kind of premiered in the 1981 series. Then you have 1982 and pretty much most of the stars. You even have a dual card with the Bronx Bombers in this particular card set. Not too many rookies that were kind of high profile. 1983 pretty much follows suits. You have all the star cards and so forth. And you see some players are beginning to kind of fade out and retire. So their last cards sometimes are present as the years go on in the 80s. And then we have the 1986 set. And again, we've got some potentially good rookies, maybe in Paul O'Neill. The already successful card in the 86 set was a Canseco, as well as cards like Fred McGriff. We move to 1987. And we've got Bo Jackson as a rated rookie. And then we also have a card of Clemente. They have a tribute card that's included in the set. And then that particular year, Mark McGwire. Now, this 87 was a rated rookie. And we already mentioned Greg Maddux. But really, McGwire's first card came out in 85 in Topps when he was on the USA Olympic team. And that was the premier card for him. Moving on to 92, we see many cards that are rated rookies, and also we see cards that are highlights and so forth. These highlight cards, we'll find they really were in a separate set. They had the same kind of markings as the 92 set, but they were given a separate set, almost like updated cards were at the time. 85, probably after 84, was the most successful card set for Donruss, at least selling for the higher prices. And you'll begin to see rookies like Danny Tartabull and Billy Hatcher in these particular card sets. You'll also see other players that are familiar and had successful careers. And on some of the cards, you're going to see there's a leaf instead of the year. And we're going to talk about that because that's Donruss and Leaf. And Leaf was kind of the Canadian version of the Donruss card in the United States. So many cards, if you're looking for them, sometimes appear with a leaf, but they're pretty much of equal value. And in rare occasions are they different. And you see the 1985 set, which again is very colorful and at a premier price, certainly in the 80s and the 90s. Then we move to 88 through 93. And really, in terms of the sets, Donruss kind of takes a back row to all the other kind of up and coming card companies. You still have rookies, but as I mentioned with Fleer, it was a bad rookie year, and you perhaps had Mark Grace and a few others, but not really a big seller for rookies that particular year. Then we move into 89, and we've got some really good rated rookies, but again, they take a backseat to other card companies, particularly this year of Upper Deck. So you have the Ken Griffey, you have Randy Johnson, and you have Gary Sheffield, which were, cards that people wanted, but there was other choices at that particular time. The 90s, sometimes by critics, is considered one of the worst sets ever created because it just, in terms of its design, had many error cards, which may turn out to be fortuitous, but it wasn't really very clear in the faces and the shadows and the coloring. And the rookie that year was Juan Gonzalez, and other card companies had his card. Then you move to 91. Again, not a whole lot of rookies that people are after in this particular set, and it's kind of busy and not real good shots in the face, and the action is more still, where you're holding a bat and not necessarily swinging or running after a fly ball or pitching a baseball. 93 follows suit, the same thing. So it's kind of phasing out. It's really kind of struggling. And as we mentioned, as we move to 94, that was a very difficult year for all card companies because of the strike. And then 95, 96, 97, 98, none are really kind of valuable cards in the sense of the competition of purchasing cards. And the Diamond Kings consistently is a part of the Donruss sets, as you can see these years at the bottom. Then you have a void. You have a void because now 1998, Donruss goes bankrupt, sells to Playoff, and other companies are kind of battling and struggling at this time. And we really don't see the Donruss logo and brand appear again until 2014, when they're purchased by Panini, and they continue to produce cards. And you can just see what they look like here in the Diamond King cards that are co-occurring with them from 2014, 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 19, going on to 2020, 21, and 22. And again, you can also see the Diamond Kings card that continue with this kind of Donruss logo, but really Donruss Panini is the company that is behind them. An interesting card that Donruss kind of produced back beginning in 1991 and up until, as we'll see, 1999, then 2001, 2005, and 2014 and beyond, was the studio card. And it really started out as a black and white portrait that's shot in studio. So this was a card. It's kind of unique and different and kind of had that close-up appearance. But apparently the black and white was not well received, or they just decided to change, because they changed the color in 1992, and they had the still and the action photo. And this particular card, again, kind of a different look to the baseball cards. Trying to be real creative, in 1995, they made studio look like a credit card. And so all the cards pretty much were designed this way and had stats right on the front. And it looked like a credit card. Then you have 1996, again, they're going back to the dual photo. This time they're both in color, and much more action in terms of these particular cards. Then you have from 1999 to 2000, that studio kind of dropped off the map, and it was absence due to bankruptcy of Pinnacle. So you have all these kind of bankruptcies that are going through the 90s and into 2000, and you have gaps in terms of when these cards are available. But it reoccurs in 2001 and 2005 under the Donruss playoff banner. And so we have the cards going from that period of time. The studio cards are still popular. And then there is another gap between 2005 and 2014, and Panini starts doing studio cards as inserts and autograph cards. So that's kind of the history of studio, which again are interesting cards, unique to collect, not so valuable, but kind of different and kind of fun to kind of make up the sets. So we have this Donruss studio, and kind of go over the history again. It goes from 91 to 98, and then there's a void of 2 years, and then it begins again with Panini, and we go all the way up to 2005. And you see Roy Halladay is the last card there. And then we are bought out by the Panini, and they basically continue to produce some cards under the name Studio. And we also had at that time the cards that were called Studio Heritage, and they were players that were kind of put in retro uniforms and so forth. And you can see the 92, 93, 94 Heritage Studio cards there at the bottom. Now, come 1990, within the Donruss organization, and remember they are also under the logo of Leaf, they produced a premium Leaf set in 1990, and this set was very, very successful. This was sort of like the 1984 Donruss, but this was sort of like a high-end Leaf, but also under the umbrella of the Donruss Corporation. And it was real popular, very expensive compared to other cards at the time, but worth it because people sensed that there would be a value if you purchased this, made a set from it, and then also got some of the key rookies. And the key rookie at that time was Frank Thomas, which it still sells well today. And you'll also see that it was kind of a preferred Sammy Sosa rookie card, even though he appeared in other update sets before that. But a very nice looking set, card quality, and sold very well at the time. And then you have, it comes out again in 91 and 92, not really ever as successful as that initial 1990 set, but still somewhat quality of sort of cards. We go back now to the Diamond Kings in 1982, 83 to 1992. They were basically available in the Donruss sets, but this is the puzzles. So as we talked about before, that in 1982, it was very unique to kind of replace the gum with the puzzle pieces, and then you put these puzzles together. So many of these puzzles, if people have the whole puzzle and so forth together, they sell for a decent price because it took effort to collect all the pieces, get enough packs, and so forth and so on. So that was it. And then we had the Diamond Kings, and so the premier Diamond Kings was the King of Kings, and you see several of these cards demonstrated here. And then we had the regular Diamond Kings from 1982 to 1992, many popular players or projected Hall of Famers. So that's what makes it up. So they're great players. Plus, it's this great art by this particular artist that has been carried out in baseball. Now, again, with that focus on the rookies, and we basically now have Donruss, like many of the companies, doing an update set, but they're calling it the rookies, and it's really just rookies. And in that set, sometimes there would be the first card of a player, but they'd still be competing with other update sets. So some of the popular players certainly would have been the Barry Bonds, the Bo Jacksons, the Ken Griffeys, and so forth, and even the Randy Johnsons today. Other cards, they kind of came out with were not as successful, but this was basically a nice card to get if you were trying to collect specific rookies of great players. You will see that. You'll see several that you might recognize. Now, again, we talked about the triple play, kind of a different card, more of a kind of a kid's card or a child or adolescent perhaps, where you had fun things on these cards and very colorful with the orange and red and yellows. And you had things like Will Clark in retro uniform. You had lots of real action shots. You had players kind of having some fun with faces and blowing gum. You even had the San Diego Chicken and father and son like Sandy Alomar and his son, events that took place at the ballpark. You had signings, Mark McGwire signing autographs. You had pictures, little guys called hot shots, and you had certainly, as I said, these action photos. So it was kind of a fun card to collect because it was different pictures than you were really used to on the standard cards. Then Donruss, kind of corroborated or worked together with the Coca-Cola company and developed a Nolan Ryan set. So that was another kind of subset that was fun to collect. And remember that Nolan Ryan was the real hit of the 90s, the early years of the 90s. So everybody wanted Nolan Ryan, so they produced a whole set through Donruss, and it had the Coca-Cola logo. Then you had another set that you basically got cards from Cracker Jacks, the Cracker Jack 1992 set. And then you had McDonald's actually offered cards of MVPs. And then it turns out the next year, 1993, they even produced a subset that had the champion Toronto Blue Jays win the Jays. And you can understand because the Donruss Leaf was a Canadian basically logo, and so it made sense that they won that year. They will make a special tribute set to the Toronto Blue Jays. So what was the uniqueness of Donruss? What basically, if you're saying I'm looking for things that are different and kind of collecting and subsets and so on, that starting back in 1981, 82, you have dual players, you have the beginning of the Diamond Kings, and certainly the set 1981 set had checklist. And then you had in 82, you had the first puzzle instead of the gum. 83 kind of was unique. It actually showed a picture of a mascot, the San Diego Chicken. We go to 94, they include Living Legends cards, and that's the start of the rated rookies. Then we go to 86, they're paying tribute to a tiebreaker in terms of Pete Rose's hit streak, and not hit streak, but number of hits. And then you have the cards starting to be included of the American League All-Stars, National League All-Stars, and they continue that. Then you had the tribute to Clemente in 86. Actually, it became a puzzle in 87 in the decks. You have pop-ups that are occurring in 80, 87. And then you have MVP cards that start appearing around 1988, kind of uniquely in this set that wasn't the greatest, but it contained a card of the Commissioner of Baseball. Then you have the long ball leaders. So from perhaps 1990 and on, there were some cards in every set that contained the longest balls hit that particular year. And then you have franchise features, players that are going to make their ball clubs because they are the franchise player. So lots of different cards that were kind of included in set to kind of get interest in terms of something different that is offered by the other sets. Okay. And then we look at, and this is just part of the problem of the baseball glut that occurred certainly in the 80s and 90s, but particularly in the 90s, where now we have lots and lots of cards to choose from and lots of different sets and so forth. So just within the Donruss Leaf corporation, you're going to find that in 1983, they had the big cards. We're going to see lots of different sizes of cards that basically come out as sets. You're going to, as we already mentioned, and maybe as we mentioned already, where you start seeing the appearance of the Leaf logo in the 45 issues. You have a whole separate set that you can collect of the highlights that it's sold like an updated set, but separate. You have the rookies that come out and they basically are going to, compete with the other update sets, but just primarily rookies. Then you have the action pack cards in 88. And now you have a real strange occurrence in 88 that you have Donruss baseball best cards. And the only difference between these cards and other cards is instead of being that year they were kind of blue and black, these cards came out as orange and black. And so the next year they came out as green and yellow. Next year they came out as blue. So just kind of different appearances of the card, and then they just sold it differently. As kind of like, so if you're trying to get a player and get all their cards, then you have to consider, okay, I've got to get two of the same card, just a different color in this. And then we already talked about in the 90s, you have the Leaf Premier set, and the key card there was, as I said, was Frank Thomas. And then the Studio Elite came out, and you have the black and white, and then it continues in color and so forth. And then you have the Elite series come out about the same year, and just special kind of appearance cards, special players. So it's almost like an insert that you collect this subset. Then you had Triple Play in '94, and then you had the again promotional cards within the Coca-Cola and Cracker Jack, and also McDonald's. You have now a studio classic that came out, and this was basically the legends like um, Jackie Robinson. And then you also had coming out a kind of a heritage studio that had the key players, but they were wearing kind of retro outfits and uniforms at that time. And then you have the Signature Series, which came out in 1995, and this was primarily included autographs as a kind of an insert and so forth card. So lots of different sets, subsets, inserts, and so forth that are interesting to collect and gather. And certainly it's easier now, is if you really are a collector, there's a glut, so the price tag shouldn't be nearly as high, and you should be able to complete your collection and your subsets. So as always is popular, and we kind of just review some of them, of the errors and variations, which makes the cards maybe more valuable if there's a market for people who like error or variation cards. So we have this Lance Parrish and the circles around this kind of yellow coloration at the top of the card, and they corrected that. So that's a corrected error. You also will have the classic era, which is a reversal where you have a right-handed thrower like Phil Gardner, and yet some of the cards look like he's left-handed. And one thing about this card with Phil Gardner, not only was it the reverse, but basically he is in a Pittsburgh Pirates uniform, yet he was traded to the Houston Astros. So that would be considered an error. You have another reverse card. Again, this is a rookie card and a popular player at the time of Juan Gonzalez, right-handed batter. Looks like he's hitting left-handed. And a real strange but interesting era was putting the face of John Glavine on John Smoltz card. So you have Glavine on Smoltz's card as a face. And so a lot of people collected both cards because it's just an interesting mistake that was made by the card company. Very subtle difference here. You almost have to kind of like, where's Waldo? Try to find where it is. But in the very bottom left-hand corner, you'll see there's a star. And one of the stars is red, one star is yellow. So it's a variation. And some people think that makes it special and pays a more premium price for that card. And then they also had a test card where they're putting it, instead of that red for the 90 series, they're putting it in blue, and that maybe became available to some people in the 90s in that set. And remember, you had 30 errors or so forth, I think, in these sets during that time. Then we have the Nolan Ryan card. This would be hard to pick up on your list, a really baseball card enthusiast. The big difference is the number on the card. So the Diamond Kings card should be 659 instead of 665. You see the regular series Diamond card is 665. So a difference in terms of labeling it the wrong number. So those are all the error cards that I kind of think are interesting to share with you. And again, they may or may not produce somewhat premium over the regular cards cost, NHC, except maybe for the Smoltz and maybe for the Gonzalez. Most of them are just standard run-of-the-mill cards, we of course called commons. They don't really garnish much in terms of sales. So that concludes my kind of brief discussion of the card company Donruss. And if you're interested in learning additional information about the baseball card manufacturers or collecting cards for fun and profit, be sure to follow us, hit the subscribe button, and view our library for YouTube videos. Also check our eBay store, where we have available for sale many of the cards shown on these videos. So take the rest of the day off, and we'll see you soon.